Hello and welcome to the Srijan webinar. Today we are going to be talking about driving operational scalability with a multi-site architecture. And to talk about this with us today, we have Brian Hibbert, CIO of ICTSI, one of the world's leading port and container services providers. ICTSI recently deployed a multi-site architecture, and Brian will talk about why and how they did that and the transformation that it has brought. In conversation with Brian, we have Arijit Dutta, technical architect at Srijan, with a deep expertise in Drupal and multi-site architecture. And together, they are going to take us through what a multi-site architecture is and the kind of benefits that it can bring to an organization. So without wasting any more time, let's get right to it. So Brian, over to you.
Good morning, everybody, or evening, wherever you are. So I'm Brian Hibbert. I'm the CIO of International Container Terminal Services Incorporated. As you just heard on the introduction, we're one of the world's leading port and terminal services providers. We've been in the business for 32 years. We're headquartered here in the beautiful country of the Philippines, and I'm talking to you today from Manila. And I can tell you the picture in my background with the blue skies and sunshine is exactly what I'm seeing outside of my window as well. So it's a fantastic place to be. We're operating ports around the world, in fact, 31 ports today in APAC, Americas, Europe, Middle East, and Africa in an amazing diverse set of locations with 11,000 employees. And it's vital to us that we present digital services to our customers in a consistent and in a very rapid manner. So we're going to talk to you about how we partnered with Srijan to do that. So before we had a multi-site architecture, and this is very typical, and I'm sure many of you resonate with this, each business unit has somewhat of autonomy, and this is by design. I mean, we are not a McDonald's, we're not a KFC where we want the same thing in all locations. We operate under different jurisdictions, in different economies, with different local cultures and populations. And therefore, we want our businesses to have the freedom to operate. Now, without a multi-site architecture, what we were seeing was each business being responsible for managing its own online presence, its own website, and its own services. The problem with this is, number one, a lack of scalability. Onboarding a new business unit in a country is very time consuming. We operate in countries where finding resources locally to build these types of technologies can be difficult. And therefore, the end result tends to vary a great deal. It takes a lot of time. And when you aggregate that cost to the enterprise, it's very expensive. Now, the other thing that I would like to mention here is we live in a world where cybersecurity and information security are now really job number one. And putting the burden of securing these types of platforms on local IT departments who are often don't have that skill set or the budgets to do this fully is also very difficult for them and very unfair to them. So we had a high cost, we had a very eclectic mix of websites and services, and of course, a lack of central control, no way of distributing information to all of those platforms, other than, of course, sending emails and trusting that people would update their websites accordingly. Now, this is a very common problem. I've worked in other companies where they've had the same challenge, different sub-brands. Of course, we have to operate in local languages, and in many of our countries where we operate now, it's not one language anymore. There are multiple languages being used in single countries. Yet we still want our local terminals to be able to manage their products and their service lines independently, to serve their local communities and customers. And in some cases, there are messages that we want to get out across multiple business units in a geography or in a certain trade route. And That, of course, is very difficult if you have different platforms. So all in all, what we were seeing was we were spending maybe more, we were slower, and it was very difficult to manage and secure. So let me hand over to Arijit, who can talk about how we did it.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Before we get into building a multi-site architecture, I'll just take a step back and talk about what multi-site architecture is. I'm sure a lot in the audience may already know about it. Multi-site architecture can be perceived as a multi-tenancy architecture where there's a single code base leased onto different websites. Now, this common code base could be the core alone, like the content management framework or the CMS we are using as the foundation, or it can also have some code for common features across all these sites. Right. So, why multi-site architecture? Now, I would say majorly it can be categorized into three aspects. One is speed. So in today's scenario, speed is very important. If we want to spin up a new website, we need to get it done fast, right? And the scalability. So if there are some features that I'm building for one site, it is very plausible that it will be required for other websites as well. Now, rather than building a feature independently for each of the websites, which will be a lot of cost and management issues, the best way to do that is I build a component once and then transfer it over to all the other websites. And then the control. I can do the audits of my code at one place. I can host all the code in one place. And if I have to do the upgrades or do some security patches, I can again do it at one place itself. Makes the maintenance of the system over time pretty easy. Now, majorly there are two approaches to multi-site. One is cloning. That is, I have got two websites. Those are identical in the way they look, the structure they have in the backend and stuff. There could be some nimble changes like a bit of change in the components, where the components are placed at the top or at the bottom, the order in which they are placed on the website, the logos would be different, and of course the content would be different. Then the second approach is feature flexible, where uh, the websites might be similar, say 75 to 80%, but still they will have some components, those are pretty localized to each of the site. Right. Taking an example, if I'm building websites for Thailand and Australia and India, perhaps. So in Thailand, there might be a requirement to put up a model window to celebrate the king's birthday or such events. That might not be the requirement in Australia or India-based websites. Now, instead of building all the components and uh, transferring it to the sites, those not really require it, creating a noise in their systems, it is better to create a few components. Those are pretty local to a particular website. Still, the majority of the code can still be common. Um, there are some considerations against multi-site as well when we don't want to get into a multi-site structure. Uh, Primarily, if the websites are pretty different, there's very less common code between them or the common features, then it is better to have two different websites rather than opting for a multi-site architecture. And if these websites hold a lot of traffic on them, even in that case, it might not be very feasible to go with a traditional multi-site. With Kubernetes and Rancher, all these technologies, it is definitely now possible that we can build architectures with sort of a multi-site, a common code base with different deployment structures. However, it depends case to case. For a lot of cases, that is overhead. Now, building the multi-site architecture for ICTSI, there were majorly two considerations when we started, the CMS that we wanted to use and the hosting service. So for content management system, we narrowed down on Drupal. One, um, it has a mature multi-site management system. Drupal has been running multi-sites for almost or even more than a decade now, and they are pretty good at it. We wanted multilingual capabilities in our websites. So as Brian mentioned, ICTSI is spread globally, and there are terminals in Brazil, Argentina, Philippines, Australia, and we're not. So at times there are requirements for the local terminals to have the content in local languages as well. Um, Plethora of contributed modules, a lot of features that we wanted to build, we could build using the contributed modules itself. And the community is pretty responsive in terms of in case we need to upgrade them for security patches and stuff. And of course, Drupal is highly scalable. In terms of hosting, we explored multiple options. For now, we uh, boiled down to AWS for multiple reasons. And the roadmap that we had for the project, we wanted more control over hosting, a lot of AWS services that we wanted to use, and we found it to be a very cost-effective solution. Uh, on a very high level, this is the sort of architecture that we built for ICTSI. The infrastructure and the application both are managed through version control. Infrastructure using Helm charts, Terraform, and all. The orchestration was built using tools like Kubernetes, Docker, Spinnaker, Jenkins, and monitored through Grafana, Kibana, and a few other third-party tools. On the application front, we have Drupal 8 as the core, built some custom modules and themes on top of it. And then for a few sites, we have even more customization, custom modules and theme where we wanted to tweak the theme a bit, custom modules for a few sites. So consider site A, which has some custom module development and tweak in the theme. In site B, there are some additional features. Site C might not even need uh, any customized feature. They can run on the template that we have created, the default template. However, that doesn't restrict us to just use the default for Site C. At any point in time when we see the need to enhance the features, we can put in some customization on top of it. So what we did with it was we created a default template for the terminal websites. And now whenever we want to create a new terminal, we just clone that website in a multi-site architecture. Uh, Reason being, one, what we wanted to achieve was uh, brand identity across all the terminals. So the look and feel needed to be the same to an extent, and also some flexibility to customize and add new modules to the site as needed. Another important feature was sharing the content between the sites. So consider the parent site has published some content and they want 10 different terminal websites to publish the same content as well. Traditionally, such kind of scenarios are handled by through emails or offline communication channels. What we have built here using the entity sharing module is whenever a content is created on one site, say the parent site, the editor can select the different terminals where they want to publish this content to. On the terminal websites, the editors receive a notification that the business wants you to publish this content on your website. We did not want to publish it directly on the websites because, as Brian said, there's sort of autonomy to the editors, how they want to manage their content, their workflows and all. So they get a notification, they can run through their moderation workflow, make changes in the content if they want to, and also do the translations before publishing the content to production. Creating multilingual websites, as already said, that was one of the major requirements. Whenever a new website is spinned up, the admins configure what all languages will be available on a particular terminal website, and the editors can translate to those languages. Content migration from the legacy sites to this new platform was done with a mix of automation and manual. So rather than automating everything, we divided the content into different groups. A few where the content was less, we did it manually. Where the content was more, we used the migrate module to migrate the data. And the migration was completed in 3 weeks with this approach. As we were talking earlier about customized or localized features for a few websites, for the parent website, we needed a ticker for Philippine Stock Exchange data. This was very relevant to the parent site, but not to the other terminal website. So it was built specifically for that. And then infrastructure on AWS. So all the developed stage and production environments are hosted on AWS, as already said, built using Kubernetes, Docker, Terraform, and Helm charts. Yeah, over to you, Brian.
Thank you. So let's talk about what life looks like after multi-site. So we now have our digital platform in place. And as you've just seen, that platform's built in a very robust manner. Our global parent site was rolled out first, very successfully. And we have now already onboarded an additional 4 terminal sites. Now, one of the interesting things here is one of those sites was actually a new business unit that we started up. And traditionally, this is actually for our new business in Kribi, in Cameroon. Now, that terminal is a general cargo terminal. It actually only has 1 IT person. And yet, as part of our broader cloud strategy, we're able to give that terminal all of the systems it needs, from ERP to terminal operating system and web presence, all instantly via the cloud. So with the automation that we now have, we were able to spin up a website and hand it over to that local business unit, to the editors. And it's worth pointing out, the editors are not IT people. These are business users. It's either the PR person, the operations people, it's the commercial people. So those editors actually now have the ability to publish and communicate to their market. That site was spun up in a couple of hours. So it's actually very, very efficient. So all of our terminal sites are now on a roadmap to be onboarded, and we're ready to expand the use of that platform rapidly. Now, not only are we able then to showcase a unified brand image, provide a recognizable, consistent experience across our sites, because this is a multi-site architecture and a consolidated platform, we also now are free to launch new services and new capabilities into that platform, and know that those capabilities and services can be distributed rapidly. And in the world that we're in, I mean, especially the crazy world that we've been living in since March this year with the COVID pandemic, the demand for a rapid evolution in digital services has been greater than ever. It is not unreasonable to deliver services quickly, but imagine how long it takes to get those services into the hands of the people that need them and want them, where the value will ultimately be delivered, if you have to then plug them in to multiple websites, multiple systems, multiple source data systems. It's incredibly complex, expensive, and time consuming. So we're really in a position now where we're focused on which new services we want to roll out and how we're going to get those into the hands of those customers very quickly. We've created a channel through which we can reach people very, very rapidly. And really that's where we're just beginning this journey. And it's very exciting. People are very excited about it. So we're rolling out new terminals very, very quickly. We're delivering those terminals in with multilingual content. Our editorial teams, and again, these are not IT people, can create new content, new pages, new layouts very quickly by leveraging the tools that we're giving them. And we can share content, not just from the parent down, but also from subsidiaries up to the parent. So we're really arming the people on the ground with the best tools that we can give them to handle their local community needs, their local customer needs. And really that's part of our broader IT strategy. We're not trying to centralize and control everything. What we're trying to do is leverage the synergies across our business units and leverage our scale to give people the very best tools, the very best time to market, and therefore the very best way of serving their customers and their local communities. And by building this on AWS, we have amazing control and flexibility. And we don't have to go and replace hardware, replace servers. As we scale this up, we know that we can scale this up with complete freedom. So if we talk about some of the things that we're building once and quickly deploying, I mean, we have a huge long list. In fact, our biggest challenge now will be, now that we have this platform, is choosing wisely what we do and when we do it. But clearly things like container track and trace, you may have seen recently an announcement that we're also integrating with the TradeLens platform. All of this is built on this consolidated platform approach. In fact, if you look at how we're integrating with blockchain platforms like TradeLens, we're actually making a single connection. So when you read the headline, ICTSI connecting 31 terminals, it's a single connection. And when we query platforms like that to augment the data that we're providing our customers, we have a single way of developing that solution and delivering that data across our business units. So we're reducing the time spent by our editorial teams. They can edit directly, they can preview content before they publish it. We're removing the local IT people to a large extent from that content creation and putting it in the hands of people who really understand that content. But the website maintenance, the infrastructure, the security, the patching, the evolution of the underlying components is being done by a central team. So we're not putting that burden out into the business units. They can focus on content, we're focused on maintaining the tools and the platform. So maintenance and upgrades are actually more seamless. In fact, we just completed a round of security patching and upgrades, and the 5 sites, the 4 terminals and the parent site that are running on this platform all benefited from that increased security without them having to do it individually. And of course, the hosting cost is now centralized. So we're able to leverage the economies of scale and the synergies on the hosting as well. So if I were to summarize this, really what we're doing is we're doing an awful lot more, and we're doing it with an awful lot less. So tying this into our enterprise data platform, of course, we can also now leverage the data. It's important to realize that websites these days are not just publishing platforms, they are commerce platforms. So we're certainly being able to deliver new capabilities very, very rapidly, and you'll see a lot more of those coming in 2021. And yet we're able to let our business units work differently. The way you want to interact with somebody in Papua New Guinea versus the way you want to interact in Australia versus Croatia, of course, may be different. And it's very appropriate that it's different. So one of the challenges, if you do this all centrally and mandate a single website across your enterprises, you lose that flexibility and you lose that personal attention to your community and your customers. And like I said, leveraging this, our cloud solutions and a data platform, we're going to be rapidly accelerating the digital presence of ICTSI and the services that we're offering our customers through 2021. So keep your eyes open, there's a lot more coming. Let me talk a little bit about working with Srijan, what it was like to work with Srijan. So first of all, we're a container terminal operator. We're not an IT company. We're not a software development company. And our core focus is on moving containers securely, safely, reliably. So it's vital for us that we choose partners that we can work with in a very rapid manner that we can establish trust with. Now, with Srijan, they came to us with a very interesting approach and said, well, rather than us trying to sell you a bunch of capabilities that you or we don't know whether you need, why don't we do a discovery process? So we actually went through with Srijan a fairly rapid discovery process where we really understood, both of us as partners, what needed to be done, our joint capabilities to get it done, and how we would work together. So when we actually went beyond discovery and we went into the production of this platform, we were all very aligned and very familiar. Now, that sounds obvious, but in many projects, there is a short sort of selection and contracting process, and then people are figuring out how they're going to work together or what they're going to do as they go through the project. And that creates a lot of overhead. And I think the discovery process worked very well in really getting rid of that overhead up front. The second thing that we really benefited from was the transparency and the way that we work together online. All of this was done using Agile, and I'll put that in quotes because people throw the word Agile around to mean all things to all people, and often it's used as an excuse to not plan. And I can tell you that this project was planned very well. It was executed to deadlines, and it was executed with a defined and well-managed budget. So Agile does not mean we don't know. But what it did mean for us is that we had flexibility. We had flexibility to very quickly review the work, to send logins to the actual platform, to our editors, to our end users, and do regular reviews of the work that Srijan were doing with them directly. And that was fantastic. We were getting feedback direct from those end users during the production process, which really made this a lot stronger. And the other benefit to us through that was we actually learned a great deal about how to do this kind of work. Our own teams are actually working on projects now internally, and they're using techniques and practices that we learned through this project. So certainly we really enjoyed that. And I hope that on the Srijan side, they were also able to enjoy direct access to people who could give them very quick feedback. And I think all of that really strengthened the outcome of this. So Arijit, how did you feel about working with us?
It was wonderful, Brian, working with you and your team. I think one of the most important things for Agile is the communication between different stakeholders, and the kind of communication flow that we had from your team side was fantastic. Anytime we had a question, there was someone available to answer it, or at least give us a direction. I think that was something that really helped us move fast and deliver this project successfully.
Yeah, I would say another interesting is we started this project really with being a multinational company. We're both multinational, so we were collaborating online. And we were doing this using a platform called Jira for the project management and the road mapping and for collaborating around the code. But we're also doing this with online meetings. In fact, none of this project was really done with in-person meetings. But we were doing that not because of COVID. We were doing that before COVID because it was actually the most efficient and the most transparent way to work. Now, if I now look at today's scenario, it makes even more sense now. But we became very good at working that way. So I would say, you know, people may assume that we collaborated online because of the pandemic. Actually, we didn't. We did it because it was a very effective way to work.
Yeah. Yeah. So communication, like I said, works at multiple levels. Jira, as you rightly said, was one of the very important tools for that communication. And I would even include like the video callings and the regular stand-ups we had, the whole team. So there was the transparency between the stakeholders and clarity on what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, what are the impediments that the teams are facing, and how to like streamline different components of the system. So yeah, I agree with you.
And of course, you know, the great thing now is as we continue this journey, we're not having to waste any time focused on anything other than doing great work for the people that we're delivering it to. So.
Yeah, certainly.
All right. I think both Brian and Arijit have sort of made a good case for multi-site architecture at this point. I think we have some questions that we would like to take up with both of them. So I think the first question is more for Brian. When you laid out the challenges that you were facing while managing multiple websites, but was there like a specific point where the organization felt like now it's getting too much and we need something to solve this? Was there like a particular point of inflection that happened for ICTSI?
I wouldn't say there was a single event, but what I will say is that I think like many businesses around the world, the demand for digital services is very high. Now, the other thing I would add is that, you know, digital service, it's like making home video versus watching professional video. People know that when you're showing them a home video versus when they're watching a professional video, not because they're experts in video production, but because they consume enough high quality video that they know the difference. And the same is true now with apps and digital services. All of us consume apps and digital services many hours per day, and therefore we inherently know when something feels good and when something doesn't feel good. So there was certainly a high demand for digital services across our portfolio and a recognition that doing these things extremely well and delivering the kind of quality that we will deliver is very difficult if you don't pull together, you don't consolidate, and you don't do this in a single way, but distribute across all of your business units. So build it once, use it everywhere. The second thing I would say is that we wanted to do this when you approach doing this as an enterprise. Of course, one of the common concerns will be that the local business unit is losing control, that corporate is taking over the messaging, corporate is taking over what I can and can't do. And we certainly did not want to do that. Our business, our employees, our leaders in Papua New Guinea, in Madagascar, in, you know, I can go through all the 19 countries, they know their market best. They know the people they serve best. So I certainly don't see us sitting here thousands of miles away telling them what is the best thing to communicate or to present to their community. So it was very important to us that we leverage the scale, but leave control out at the edge where they know their market and they know their customers. So I think the combination of those two, reassuring people that they're not losing control, but giving them the best tools and the best quality solutions and modules that they can leverage is really the 1-2 punch.
All right, all right. That makes perfect sense, and I think that would make sense for a lot of other global organizations as well. Now, before I take up the next question, Arijit, maybe you could stop screen share and we can see both of your faces in a little bit bigger screen, probably. Yeah, yeah, that's great. All right. So the next question, I think, and that's also for Brian. Before I move on with the third question for Arijit. So the next question is, do you, what so there is definitely would have been a cost of shifting to or transforming to a multi-site architecture. And so how do you think that compares to the kind of benefits or results or returns that you're seeing on that investment right now?
Well, certainly there is a cost to shifting that. But if you're operating at scale, like we are, the actual cost of maintaining 31 independent websites, of securing 31 independent websites, of hosting 31 independent websites. If you look at this, the economics actually make sense. So by looking at how we distribute that cost across the enterprise, what we're actually seeing is that individual locations, although there may be a small upfront increase in cost, in the long run, it makes perfect sense with a lower TCO. And again, of course, if you then look at the cost of developing these services individually, I mean, that skyrockets very, very quickly. So I actually think that economically this makes sense.
Yeah, and just to add to that, perhaps, if I may, so there's also some overhead costs of management, of managing so many different digital assets, right? And then there is cost of, as Brian said, of development as well. So all these different websites might be using different CMSs or frameworks or even some custom solutions. Right. So even like hiring people, training the editors into the backend, how to put in the content, what kind of flexibility they have in terms of creating the pages and all, like the training as per se. So even that comes with a cost. And another thing, as we are moving to a more and more digital transformation across the industry. So this tech and this digital footprint is bound to grow. And this is perhaps a kind of a step in streamlining and future-proofing the assets. So the scale is definitely going to come in next few years. It is just about how soon we get into streamlining and centralizing assets as much as we can while allowing the business autonomy, as Brian said.
The other thing I would add is, people often underestimate the cost of running the vulnerability scanning, the malware protection, the DDoS protection. I mean, there is an enormous list of things that you need to do to secure your digital presence. And that also adds up very quickly. So by consolidating it, we're able to really focus on securing that platform.
All right, all right. And now my third question, which is primarily for Arijit, because this is from a little bit of a technical standpoint. What do you anticipate, or in working with ICTSI, what did you notice were the possible sort of challenges or roadblocks that an organization can expect while transitioning to a multi-site architecture?
I think I can think of two at the moment. The major challenges that we had considered at that time. One was the migration. So all these terminals already have their websites and they have got their content. Now, if I'm building a multi-site architecture, I need to create a sort of a common foundation for all the websites. Now, the structure that I'm creating that needs to be flexible enough to hold the content or the different content structures of different websites. In our case, it was over 30, right? So how do we make a content structure flexible enough to uh, I have the different kinds of content into its pages. So that was one. The second one was about the training. So when you move to a new system, training is another part that needs to be done to the editors or the business, whosoever is the stakeholder. So how do we do that? Right. So it could be through creating the user manuals or some videos. And even apart from that, then there will be some sort of personal support that you may need to provide. So that was one thing that we did. So our developers were available for whenever a new site was created. Our developers were available to answer or help the editors to get used to the new system for whatever question in terms of content entry or what can be done. And if they had questions about some specific component that was very localized to their site, how to build that. So we tried to provide as much support as we could, and we have got good feedback about that.
I would say, Arijit, one of the benefits of having the developers do that as well was they were directly seeing how what they had built was being used. So we were also seeing many instances where the developers themselves were then standing up and saying, hey, now I've seen that, I think we can make this easier or we can make this better. So that direct contact with the developers was very valuable.
Yep, agreed.
Okay, all right. So I think we're very close to the time that we had for this session. I think before we sort of conclude this, I think my last question would be to Brian. So if you had to give sort of one piece of advice for organizations that are sort of right now evaluating whether they should or shouldn't go for a multi-site architecture, what would that be?
I think I can guess the end of that question. I think the mute button came in a bit quick there. So one piece of advice for somebody considering multi-site versus non-multi-site, like, I think none of us can predict the future very well. That's I think we can all honestly look ourselves in the mirror and say, would we have a year ago predicted how we would be working and living today? And the answer is, of course, universally no. If I take that same approach and embrace the unknown in terms of digital services, how customers want to be reached, how they want to be served going forward, then I need to establish a platform that enables me to focus on what's valuable. And that is doing something new, doing something exciting, and getting it into the hands of the people that value it quickly. And to me, when you look at that and you embrace the unknown and you expect to be agile, you expect to be delivering these things rapidly, I honestly struggle to find an argument for a non-multi-site architecture in that sense. So clearly I'm the wrong person to ask about why not to use multi-site architecture, because we've made that evaluation and our answer is fairly clear.
All right, all right. I think so in that case, we've sort of come to sort of an agreement that there is definitely a very strong case for multi-site architecture, at least for enterprises that are running different brands or working across different geographies, and they should sort of strongly evaluate. And I hope both Brian's and Arijit's inputs have sort of helped make that decision or that evaluation a little bit easier for our audience today. So I think thank you, Brian, and thank you, Arijit, for taking out the time and joining us for this webinar. And this has been a really, really insightful session. And thank you for everyone who's joined us today from whichever part of the world. So with that, we would like to conclude this session. And once again, thanks everyone for joining.